Hello and welcome to this review of my Morrow Designs BT1200A-1 keyboard. I got this keyboard from eBay quite a while ago. It was pretty cheap, thankfully. I originally thought it would have different switches, but they turned out to have SMK vintage linears, which is just as good because I really need to cover these as well. In retrospect, I could have easily known they used SMKs because I didn't look at the keycaps properly. It uses thick spherical keycaps with a rather distinctive shape that's telling for SMK Vint linears. They're made out of ABS and have very nice double-shot lettering. They look a bit like cherry sphericals, which I first mistook them for, but if you look closely you can see the differences. They're great caps regardless. Look at that big print and those sharp edges. The telltale SMK trait is the extreme taper towards the top, which gives very small key tops and big distances between them. It's not bad actually, it makes it more difficult to accidentally strike multiple keys at once. So as for the switches, as mentioned before, they're SMK Vintage Linear, formerly model number J-M0404, which are these beasties right here. They're a rather old switch design from before the DIN standard that required keyboards to be no more than a certain height, which, as you can see from this loose switch, is difficult to maintain with switches this tall. They ping quite a bit, which is to be expected, I guess, and they have a most affirming clack noise. Listen to this. Even the sound of rubbing your fingers over the keycaps sounds like some kind of infernal machine at work. They were supplanted by the much more common and well-known second generation SMK switches, which I've covered several times before on the channel. Like many switch redesigns of the time, this also saw the introduction of tactile and clicky designs, as tactile and audible feedback was becoming more sought after. One such new clicky SMK was the famous Monterrey Switch, which is this one here. The original first-gen J-M0404 switches were all linear though. The SMK first gen switch was also the basis of a wide variety of clones, or the other way around. The exact chronology of this type of switch is not completely established. The most well-known clones are probably Maxi Switch Vintage Linear, which had blue side tabs, and NEC Vintage Linear, which had a blue slider, but several others existed as well, and details on who made which ones and when are sketchy at best, to be honest. A spec sheet on a keyboard with these in does survive thankfully, and several curious traits emerge from it. For example, despite being a very tall switch, it has only 3 mm of travel, and furthermore it has a rather long lifetime of 100 million keystrokes, which is far more than other contact-based switches from the early 80s, such as Alps SKCM and Cherry MX, which all specify 20 million cycles as lifetime. I'm not sure what causes this difference in durability, to be honest, just like I'm not sure how Cherry MX went from 20 million to 50 million at some point. My theory is it's all meaningless numbers. Anyway, the rather stiff 90-gram weighting, or so the spec sheet says, coupled with a short travel, gives a rather strange feeling switch that I don't find all that pleasant if I'm honest. It's not super smooth either, and while it's tolerable, I guess, I'm not too disappointed that I can't use it over USB, despite the unit really being quite clean. The board itself is an interesting beast. It's fairly big, as I'm sure you can tell, and originally I couldn't find much about it until I found out that it was used with the Liberty Freedom 100 computer, which is the most American sounding thing I've ever heard of. Although it's Liberty branded on the bottom of the keyboard, it shows Morrow Designs on top, which was George Morrow's company. I couldn't find exactly what tied Morrow Designs and Liberty Electronics together. Maybe they just made different parts of the system, or it was just a simple rebrand, but Morrow Designs didn't outlive the 80s when they were outmaneuvered by Zenith Data Systems, or in Liberty Freedom units, Zenith. The unit weighs a little over 1.7 kilos and is 44 centimeters wide, despite not even being a full size, and is rather eye-catchingly tall too at 7.5 centimeters. Looks a bit like a mini beam spring keyboard. Overall, it's very well built, with a thick plastic case and metal mounting plate. It has almost no flex to speak of, despite the fact that it creaks quite a bit. It comes with a black ribbon cable and 4P4C connector. I have no idea what protocol it speaks, so I can't really use it over USB, although I'm sure it's possible to wire up a converter for it. At the back, it's also got a fairly big speaker unit. Presumably it made beeps or chirps when a key was actuated, which some other keyboards at the time had as well. The idea behind this was that you'd still get audible feedback even though the switches were linear. Like I said, clicky switches would quickly gain traction soon after this, and linear switches, which made up the majority of switches around the late 70s, early 80s era, would become far less common and eventually all but disappear until the resurgence of mechanical keyboards in the 2010s. As you can see from the serial number sticker of the keyboard, it's from 1983, bit of an oldie then this one. You can also see the Liberty branding here, ironically along with their address in Taiwan. Like I said, I have no idea how Liberty were tied with Morrow Designs, but I did also find one of these keyboards with Liberty top branding recently. Being from 1983, you won't be surprised that it uses a rather weird layout. For example, it's got a line nav and is located all the way at the top of the keyboard. It's got only 5 F keys, a medium-ass enter key, single unit backspace, a latching caps lock key next to control, for reference, latching keys stick down with every other key press, and the spacebar is the only key on its row, plus, of course, there's the ever-popular rub-out key. It uses a unique type of stabilization as well. Being too lazy or cheap to actually use stabilizers, they put in these brown and cream switches, which came with lubricant on them to prevent binding between the slider and the housing when pressing it off axis. Needless to say, this barely works, and if you press these keys on a place other than dead center, they stick pretty badly, as you can tell. It might have worked better when the lubricant was still fresh, but nowadays, forget it. Anyway, overall this is a pretty interesting keyboard, and not a bad looking one either, with its subtle slate grey and black colorway, but the switches aren't great and the layout would need some serious work. Note that the keycaps are uniprofile, so if you'd convert it, you could program a new layout and rearrange the keycaps, which might help a bit. That's it for this review. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard.